got 28, 29 participants to join in, 34, 40. So those of you that are just now joining us, let me just say thank you. We appreciate you joining us. And Sean and Steve, we appreciate you guys participating in this to help the Texas inspectors. And I think this ought to be a great class. I mean, we cut it to the very end of January, it seems like, but the reason we did this is because we started having so many questions come in about the report form, about the new changes and SOPs, and you know, how do I get the Word document to use if that's what they're using for their report form? So, you know, it's just a lot of questions. So we're trying to push this thing in, and that's the reason we don't have it as a TREC continued education class. So this does not provide TREC credit for those of you that are attending, and we're up over 109 right now that's joined us. So welcome, guys. I would ask if you would give us a question, put it in the chat box, and we'll stop periodically and go through those questions if they're not already answered. So and with that, I'm going to say introduce to you Steve Reinhardt and Sean Emmerich. Both of them serve on the TREC IAC board and have for many years. I know this year Sean has stepped up to be the chair of that thing. And good luck on that, Sean. Appreciate you stepping up, buddy. Steven's done that before. Of course, he steps backwards now.
Yeah.
He said, no, let somebody else do it. But hey, we appreciate y'all's work and appreciate y'all's representation at TREC.
Yes, sir. Steven's getting ready to start drawing his pension.
Yeah.
His big TREC pension.
All right. Well, Sean, I'll let you start it off then.
Okay. All right. Well,
hold on one second, Sean. I had one chat. Somebody said, is this for Texas only? Yes, this class is designed for the Texas licensed home inspectors that hold a Texas real estate inspector's license. You're more than welcome to join us and listen to it, but that is for a Texas class only. So right now, Sean, we're up to 127 people still joining. So again, if you're joining late, welcome. We appreciate you being here. Sean, I'll leave it up to you.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it, Paul. So my name is Sean Emmerich. I've been inspecting in and around the Houston area since 1998. So I've seen a few houses over the years. I started off this was my part-time job when I was working for the fire department, and it quickly grew into a full-time job. So now I retired from the fire department, and this is all I do the last 10 plus years. So and in 2017, I got appointed to the TREC Inspectors Advisory Committee, and a couple of years ago, and immediately I was put on the SOP subcommittee, and we met periodically trying to update the standards of practice, and we made a big push over the last 2 years. COVID slowed us down a little bit, but thanks to remote meetings and Zoom, we were able to push through this and get everything adopted. So I chaired that committee the last 2 years, the subcommittee, and I tried to promote as much activity as possible amongst the inspectors community. I know Paul joined several times, and we had probably a dozen or so participants in the meetings, and it was not this way. This is the only way it's going to be. We were very open to suggestions, but we also had some directions from TREC on what needed to be updated and how things needed to be changed. And once we got a rough draft, we took it to the full committee, and we're able to get input from the full committee and any visitors that were there that time. And then we took it back, made some final changes, and then it was presented to the commissioners after passing. So what I'm going to do is just go through some of the highlights of changes, and we can talk about all that. And then we can go through the report template, and Stephen can, he was chairing the education subcommittee, so he was on the other side of this, trying to bring our educational pieces up to current SOPs and reflect what changes we've made. So I don't know if everybody has, you can find the SOPs on TREC's website, the new updated ones that go in effect Tuesday. I have a copy right here, so I'm just going to kind of go through there. The current copy that's on TREC's website has stamped all across there, do not use before 2/1/22. And the reason behind that is TREC was very concerned about releasing these in advance, where inspectors start following these and not following existing one before these were actually went into law or went into effect. There's some changes in here that TREC wanted to make sure everybody followed the old ones before this one went into effect. So just starting with the general provisions, we had some clarification in the required and reasonable appropriate tools to satisfy the requirements of the standards of practice. So we looked at that section that talks, section C, where we're just getting into the scope of what the standards of practice are and the general provisions, where it kind of lays out the requirements of the tools. And there was some kind of the back history on that is, and Stephen remembers some of these conversations where there were some inspectors disciplined in Texas for, I believe it was a dryer receptacle not being checked. And we had a lot of conversations whether that was a specialized tool or not. And there were some directives from TREC on if we should specifically call out every single tool an inspector in Texas is expected to carry and to use on a regular basis. And we just felt like as a subcommittee that was not a good idea for us to try to address every single tool. So how we addressed that is that we just came up with a blanket statement that basically says that the inspector needs to use, I mean, we're all intelligent, we've all been to school, we've all been trained, we need to use the appropriate tools to satisfy the standards of practice. So if there's a standards of practice now that talks specifically about 250 volt circuits, we need to verify that there's power present there. So the inspector is required now to figure out what tools he or she wants to use to check that receptacle or to check that circuit. So that's why there's a clarification made in there. We add some comments about sewer line cameras, because I know a lot of inspectors are now using sewer line cameras, which was approved by the Texas, whatever, the Attorney General ruled in favor of the inspectors that home inspectors can run cameras, sewer line cameras, and the definition of plumbing was redefined. So instead of coming out with an SOP on this is how you use a drone, this is how you use a sewer line camera, and this is how you use an infrared camera, and on and on and on. What we put in here was that the inspector needs to have the specialized tools that the inspector needs to have whatever training necessary to demonstrate that they're competent to use those specialized equipment. So we listed in there cameras, sewer line cameras, drones, infrared cameras, elevation devices. So if you're using any of those devices that are outside of what the standards of practice call for, you need to have some kind of certificate or some kind of training to say, I'm doing this and I've been trained and I'm proficient in that. The enforcement division we've talked to them a lot about this. And if there's something, say for example, there's some kind of complaint generated for a drone, you were flying a drone, and so a consumer generated a complaint to TREC about whatever you were doing with this drone, enforcement would want to see your FAA license showing that you have been certified to use this drone, that you have some kind of training and knowledge to use it. So that would be their baseline to establish that. So if you're doing sewer line inspections, please get some type of certification or training so you can demonstrate if anything ever comes up to TREC that you've been trained and have knowledge on how to use this sewer line camera. So that was how we kind of addressed all the specialized equipment, is by saying the inspector's smart enough to figure out what tools he needs to use, and if he has to use specialized tools, then they need to get training on that and be able to demonstrate that. So that was kind of the big section there. We add some definitions for gas distribution sections because we did add a gas section in the plumbing. For years, there's been lots of requests to gas section. Stephen, how long ago was it that gas was in the TREC report template? Was it?
It was in, I know at least 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And then there was I was going to say about 8-10 years ago, there was some kind of reorganization of the form where we took out some things. If you've been around a while, you remember there used to be trash compactors and
Yes.
doorbells.
yeah,
When we took them out, it wasn't that you didn't have to inspect them. It just wasn't, on the report form. And
right.
gas was there. I think we had outdoor kitchen or cooking appliances.
Yeah, and we had whole house vacuum systems. I think
Yep.
there was a line for that.
Yep. So some of the things we realized, if it was something that 5% of the houses or less had, it probably didn't need to be in the report
Right.
form.
Yes. Yeah, so that's what there was a feedback from a lot of different inspectors from around the state saying we don't know where to put the gas stuff. We tried our best to clarify where to put the gas. We have a gas section now. We attempted to take gas out of every section of the report and put it in the gas section, but there came back some feedback that, well, what if a specific component at the heater has a gas problem? Where do we report that? So we still left gas in a few sections of each individual appliance, but overall the gas was all moved to one section of the plumbing report. So so there was a little housekeeping on that, housekeeping on addressing the current standard report that's been revised, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then a lot of the other stuff was left the same. We clarified the departure provision. There was a desire to make sure that, take for example, if an inspector never checks a T&P valve, we wanted to clarify that inspector needs to be notifying the client as soon as practical that they're departing from that part of the standards of practice. So we clarified in the SOPs, just strengthen the wording. The wording was already there, but it basically says if the inspector routinely departs from an inspection of a component or system required by the standards of practice, the inspector has reason to believe that the property being inspected includes that component or system. The inspector shall not perform the inspection of the property until the inspector notifies the client or the prospective client that the component or system will not be inspected. So basically, there's just we just really want to encourage people, if we're not saying it's the end of the world. Like, let's say you don't ever get on 2-story roofs or one-story roofs. You just did not feel comfortable walking on 1-story roof. You did not want to get on a 1-story roof, and you will never get on a 1-story roof. We want to make sure that the consumer, when they hire you, understands that you're going to inspect the roof using a drone, binoculars, or whatever, but you're going to depart from the standards of practice and not get on that 1-story roof ever, or a crawl space. If you don't ever get underneath houses, the consumer, TREC feels like the consumer needs to know that, so they can make a decision if they continue, want you to continue to do the inspection, since it is required by the SOPs. And that was pretty much a wrap on the general provisions. We have any comments or questions over that?
Yeah, we got one question, I suppose. It says, can we move the report identification line to the bottom of the page?
Let's see.
Report identification line? Are we talking a footer? Or what are you talking about?
I'm trying to find that too. I see it on the top of page 3 when we start into the structural systems. I don't believe you can move that. But we can get clarification from enforcement. Do you see what he's talking about, Stephen?
You mean on the form?
Yeah, on the form.
Let me grab a form here.
After you go through the first 2 pages of the form, the top of the structural systems, and every page after that, it says report identification. And I don't think you can move that.
Hold on, I'm opening up a new one here. There we go.
Because the stuff on the bottom has to stay there, and I don't think you can,
Well, you're allowed to change the footer on everything but page 1. So you can put your own, and these are typically software driven.
right,
So even though the example shows the promulgated by TREC on every footer,
right,
the rules only state that you
yeah,
cannot change it on the page 1. That's page 1, not counting a cover sheet.
right,
That one's unnumbered. So
right.
you can change, I don't know, the report identification.
Let me, I'm
I
gonna
don't,
write this down, and I'll email enforcement after.
Yeah.
we get off.
so we may have 3 different types of answers. One we've already addressed and we kind of know the answer because we've asked TREC. One is, this is our opinion because maybe TREC hasn't addressed it, or one that, oh, that's a good question. And what we'll do is we'll give these answers to Paul and he'll be able to post them maybe on the website of the answers that we find.
I think I've got your answer, Steve. I think it's yes, no, maybe.
Yeah. Well, as far as I remember it, the rules only, when they're talking about headers and footers, I think it only says footer, and it says
Yeah.
footer on the first page. I don't know that there is a statement in the rules about header.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll get an answer for you on
And
that.
I got another couple of questions while we're on questions.
Sure.
So, does TREC define the competency required that is called in number 4 of the general provision? Does TREC define the competency required?
That was discussed yesterday. So we had an exam development meeting yesterday where we're working on the test, but we got off on a few tangents, and one of them was just that, on the competency, because we're actually writing a question about it. And attorney staff said that, there's no way you could really define, that moving target of what's considered competent. What they said is, if you're using any specialized equipment or procedure that's above the standard that is perceived as part of the inspection that we do, and that there was a list of those, it said just be trained and competent, be able to explain yourself if you were asked.
Yeah.
It might, if they said, well, if you'd said, I watched a YouTube video on how to run that thing, you might be on the fringe, and it's basically, if you perform that procedure improperly because you weren't ever trained in it, there's your exposure. Not that something just went wrong and you had an accident, so they really just said it's up to you, and it's going to be on a case by case if there was a belief that you just didn't know what you were doing.
And just to promote InterNACHI and TREC's membership benefits, you can go on InterNACHI and take hundreds of different tests to show that you're competent in performing septic inspections or water well inspections. So you can get certificates all day, and I require most of my inspectors to get on there and do that. So we can demonstrate some kind of certificate that we took a class and that we have an understanding of how a moisture meter works or something like that. So use that resource, because that's part of your membership you're paying for.
Yeah, and you might find a difference between academically competent and proficient physically. So a lot of things you can learn, academically online in classes. There are just some things you just can't get around getting out there and getting your hands on and doing them. So don't be lulled into thinking I can just watch somebody do something. And
It's kind of like flying a helicopter, wouldn't it, Steve?
Yeah. Hey,
I saw it on YouTube. Surely I can do this.
Yeah. You taking off is easy. It's the landing part. You got to have equal number, takeoff and landings.
All right, another question. So for the new gas section, what will be in it? Meters, manifolds, and valves, etc. Then he says, in other words, the water heater and furnace and oven, gas burning will all still have their own sections, correct? If so, what specifically goes in the gas section?
Well, everything, and like I said, initially we took everything, gas out of every section, and then we were like, whoops, what if there's a specific component related to that appliance? So I would say, like if you're, for example, if you're testing an oven and you have a gas leak somewhere at the top of the manifold or something at the top of the range that has a gas leak there, it would be reported because it's specific to that appliance. The appliance itself needs to be repaired. You would report that in the oven range section. If it's the gas line that's connected to the oven, so basically anything from the appliance back is going to be in the gas section, is how we try to come up with wording and definitions to make it effective where you can report it. One thing where enforcement did say is, because we had a lot of concerns about this, if you report a gas problem that was close to the oven in the oven range section, and you don't put it in the gas section, enforcement was on several calls where they said, you're not going to be disciplined, or there might be some kind of like, we encourage you to do some more training or something on this, but they were basically saying there wasn't going to be discipline if you're reporting the problem and it ends up in the wrong section. If you put a roof leak in the plumbing section, that's probably going to be an issue. But if you're reporting gas problems and you can't decide where it goes, you can either put it in both sections or whatever section you feel most appropriate. But we felt like anything from the appliance back to the meter is something that goes in the gas distribution section. And that's why we laid out the definition that's in there on the general provisions number 7, defining what the gas distribution section system is.
And
So
that's
we've had a
probably,
lot of-
We put it on that report if we have a leak or something.
Yes. And
Okay,
by the way,
another-
you need to notify the seller too, because it's a hazard. So
It's a hazard, exactly. All right, so if I complete certified drone pilot training course in InterNACHI, am I eligible to fly a drone? Or do I still need the FAA certificate? And I will answer that, absolutely you will.
right. Yeah. Enforcement has said that even specifically.
Yeah, so if you're flying a drone out on your inspections and you're not licensed to fly that drone and something happens on that inspection or the neighbor decides to turn you in because you're flying a drone, then you just opened up a can of worms for yourself.
Yeah.
Another question is, can you show a sample of the first few pages of your new report?
I have it right here. Do you want me to share my screen? I don't know if I have that.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Let me see how I can change this.
There it is. I got
There you
it.
go.
So this is the new report. Basically just has a cleaner look, and all this, the old report just had paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. We tried to, with staff's help, TREC staff's help, put this into a concise, more readable document. So we put headers in here: responsibilities of the inspector, responsibilities of the client, so that because the client needs to understand that they have responsibilities in this transaction too. Some of the limitations, and then we have this notice of hazardous conditions, which was in there last time. Again, just made it more, try to make it more concise and readable. And then additional information, and this is a section that the last question was about, that we're going to check with enforcement on. If this can be removed from the top and moved to the bottom.
Sean, can you go to that gas section on plumbing for me?
There we go.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah.
Everybody can see it? There you go. Okay, I had a question. So how would you describe type of gas or water distribution types when the distribution may change to multiple types in the house?
Yeah, We have been reporting all the different materials we observe. So just like anything in TREC inspection, it's whatever you can observe without, causing damage to the property or, dismantling stuff. So we see black iron pipe coming in the wall and outside the meter, and then we get inside the house and we see CSST running around parts of the house. Then we would report black iron, CSST, and we even go to the step of saying flex, because we see the flex lines at the appliances.
Good. And another thought that you guys may want to consider, and if you put in your identifying the types of water pipes or gas lines, even electrical lines, you probably want to put where visible, because you are limited. What you can't see, you can't see, but what you did see, that's what you identify.
Yeah, that's a
That'd
good,
be a fair statement.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah. Because it can't help to reiterate and put stuff on the report to make sure the client fully understands that we didn't tear walls open and trying to figure out all the different types of gas and water lines.
Exactly, because consumers' expectations sometimes exceed what we do on an inspection.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably more than once it says this is a visual. We're not destructive testing. So when it asks you to cite the location, say the water meter, the shutoff, or the types of pipes, if it's not visible without, digging or doing something else, you just say it. Either it wasn't visible or I only saw PEX or I only saw PVC. Doesn't mean it's the only thing there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could say, I think in ours, we just are saying these are the types that were visible.
Yeah.
Good. But we're having a lot more questions pop up, guys. So let me try to run through some of these with you so we keep up with them. So with the cleaner look on the form, especially first page, was any information removed?
I'd have to look at our drafts and stuff. There was information removed, but I think it was all non-substances. So in other words, some of this might have been in a long, well-written, paragraph, and then we took it and just made bullet points out of it. So I don't think anything of any significance was removed, but I'd have to double check on that.
I think some of that is probably what we call the OP1, or the things that are quote not grandfathered, those list of is it 9 or 11 things on the next page.
Right.
Those are still the same.
Yeah, all this.
Yeah, that list right there.
Yeah.
And those, if you've got a pristine showroom 1942 house, probably every one of those are going to be there, because we're there to inform the consumer of things that are not there, that are safety related, that they would get if they were buying a new house. Obviously the person selling that house isn't going to say, well, we don't have, like buying an old car. They don't remind you don't have airbags, shoulder harness, all those things, but you will at least know those type of things here, and that's what that's for.
Yeah, I think it's a good layout on it, guys. I think y'all did a very good job on that one.
Yeah, it's not saying that the house broke. It's just we raised the bar, and like most of us say in our report, whether these are listed as a deficiency, which may make it look like something broke, but I think a lot of us will enhance the statement by saying, this wasn't required or may not have been required when the home was built, but this is, enhanced safety on current homes, and you need to be advised that your home doesn't have some or, all or some of these things.
Exactly. If we could only meet that expectation of that consumer reading that report.
We're trying to help them.
Yeah.
Someone else is asking, where would you put your company logo?
We changed the rule where you can put it up here.
Yep.
This used to not be allowed to be removed, although we all removed it. But we changed that rule a few years back, didn't we, Stephen, where you could remove this?
Yeah, it was never intended
Right.
to be permanent. It was just a space holder, but it wasn't clarified until somebody asked, can we take
Right.
that off? You know, a lot of people have their logo on a cover sheet, but if you don't have a
Yes.
cover sheet, put your logo right there.
Okay, good. All right, it says under the SOPs, do inspectors have an obligation to advise a client to inquire about insurability of a house, such as hazardous electrical panels or deficient roofs?
No.
I mean, so if you make deficient comments about the
Right.
roof covering, can you go the next step and say you might want to check with your insurance company to make sure it's insurable? I mean, your report can be full of recommendations,
Right.
which makes it real long. We don't make, I mean, just a business decision, we don't make a lot of recommendations unless it's just really obvious.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to find right here, because I knew this bullet point was in there. Inspection does not imply insurability or warrantability of the structure of its components.
Yeah.
So it
I mean,
might be, like Steven said, it might be a hazard that we report, but we're not informing the consumer whether or not insurance is going to be able to have a problem with it or not, or you're going to be able to get insurance on the house.
Yeah.
If it has aluminum wiring.
You got a consumer has to decide on any of the deficiencies on whether or not they want to pursue getting them fixed, having somebody fixing them. You know, you could say, and I see it all the time, you know, the roof covering is worn and recommend consulting a licensed roofer. Well, I think a lot of people have misnomers about who's licensed in Texas. We only got electricians and plumbers. Everybody else is free range. So,
Yeah.
you know, when you say licensed and they search out a licensed person and they don't exist, that kind of confuses them of why you're telling them to do it.
Kind of puts egg on your face too if you don't know the correct answer on that one. Yeah, one of the things I always ran across was when a house has a wood shingle roof and they cover it up with composition.
Yeah.
You know, I've always notified my client that, hey, you may want to check with your homeowner's insurance to see if this would be covered, because that's the answer is usually a no on that one.
Yeah, right. And you know, there might be some things like that that are very valuable for the consumer that we learned. You know, we've got some scars and battle wounds where we didn't know that, and that's the benefit of hiring an experienced inspector, is they've probably dealt with it over the years, things like that. And yeah, that's probably a place where I would probably say something about, you know, don't ignore this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question, guys, it says, what are acceptable terms to use for type of piping materials? How general, how specific are we expected to report?
Well, it's just the material. And if you really wanted to get picky, you can go to the free codes, IPC codes. I think it's chapter, it's got materials, piping, approved piping materials. Now, it doesn't mean that what you see is on the approved list.
Right.
You know, piping materials in the plumbing code, you won't find PVC. We see it everywhere. But it lists them, they're common names, you know, CPVC, cast iron. I mean, all those type of things are there. I think if you use some weird trade name, you might be confusing somebody.
And this came up because enforcement was on with that. Enforcement I represented on a lot of our meetings, just so we could ask questions like this, or we could get their opinion. And they're not expecting us to go so far to identify every product involved in that. You know, is it, you know, if you can't figure out the type of piping, if it's a plastic pipe running through there, plastic is acceptable, you know, because we have all kinds of different looking PECs these days. And if you can't identify any markings on a yellowed piece of PVC that might be CPVC or PVC, an old version of it that's yellowed over the years, you can't find markings that identify it as plastic, enforcement said would be acceptable. So you can get as specific or stay generic if you want to, just metal pipe.
Yeah.
You don't want to say galvanized, black iron or whatever.
Yeah, there's like there's a table in chapter 6 in the plumbing code, and it lists real trade names, galvanized steel pipe, ductile iron, water pipe, if you want to get technical. But for the most part, just, the names that we use every day, I saw PEX or I saw plastic. The idea is give the client kind of an idea of what all's in his house.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you guys read the chat box yourself?
I'm moving it a little closer. It's moving pretty fast.
Yeah, I got trying to go back up to where we left off. What was the last question? Company logo, obligation to advise the client, what acceptable terms.
Yeah, we were on that under the SOPs. Do inspectors have to talk about the roof and everything else on it. Yeah, there's several of them there. Plastic pipes. Y'all kind of pretty well identified that. All the plumbing. Let's see. We know we can change the report on that that one comment there, and then the next one. Can you provide an example of deficiency with gas appliances be required to be reported under the new gas section of the report? If there's already a section in the report specifies gas appliance furnace, I think you answered it already, but if you want to clarify it, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just the reason we got plugged back in there, like if there's something specific, like this, for example, with the fireplace. I'm pulling up the fireplace section right now. But if you have a gas fixture installed in the fireplace not associated with a gas distribution system, then you will report that deficient. So if there's a gas specific to the fireplace problem, then you would report it in the fireplace section. If it's from the valve back, basically, then you would replace it. You would report it in the gas distribution section. So,
okay. Here's one. So in the SOP, it states that it is not required to test the accuracy of a thermostat, but inspectors are required to check the delta T between supply and return temps. Since there is a range of delta T temperatures that would indicate if it's acceptable. Isn't that, let's see, where we go? Isn't that checking the thermostat?
No.
I
mean, I can put the thermostat on 60.
Yeah.
And on most units, it's just basically going to activate the air conditioning. And the idea is to know whether or not it is actually cooling. So yeah, you're not really checking the accuracy of the thermostat, but that's actually excluded in the SOP.
Yeah, the intent was initially we were going to leave it generic, but there's been inspectors disciplined over the years for not calling out temperature differentials outside 15 to 20. So TREC, even though it was never in the SOPs, TREC enforcement was using 15 to 20 deltas. So initially our SOPs that we proposed did not have a drop in there, and the full committee and visitors that were at that meeting recommended that we address that issue, that we needed to have some standard to basically tell the inspectors this is what TREC expects. So we had a meeting over it. We had a lot of people on that call. Although there is some people in Texas that will just use how the house feels or how it's cooling. The majority of people on that call were using some type of deltas to render a performance opinion. And so we came out with Scott Regan, that's on the committee, has his licensed HVAC, he's a licensed HVAC contractor. We got his opinion. We took a lot of opinions from everybody on the call, and we came up with the 15 to 22. And there is a second part of that that says if you don't want to use that, then you need to use something that you can demonstrate to enforcement, or if there's ever a complaint that says, I did not use the delta, I used this standard, I used this means of testing it. I mean, we looked at some ASHRAE standards where the home, if it's a certain temperature outside, it has to reach a certain temperature on the inside. We looked at that. And those could, if you feel comfortable using that, I know there's a comment about the 203 consultant. You know, if you want to use a different standard, then you can default to that and say, I did not use the delta, I use this standard, because we wanted to make it where if you absolutely hate the idea of using a delta, but the delta does not speak to the thermostat at all. So there's no reason, you don't have to take your deltas off the thermostat. You take them off a device that you're using.
Yeah, it's basically just a method to show that we actually did do something to inspect the AC system.
Yeah.
If you use a different method, just report this is a method I used.
Correct.
Okay, another question, guys. It says if you call out, for example, the lack of a settlement trap under the water heater, is it reported under the gas section or the water heater section?
Gas distribution section.
Or both?
Or
both, yeah.
back to your, so I mean, somewhere you have to draw a line between distribution and the appliance.
Right.
And most people will do it at the cutoff.
Yes.
I mean, so you go from the meter, which we now have to report the location if we see it.
Right.
And then from there to, personally, I use the cutoff. And I say
Yes.
that's distribution.
Right.
And everything after the cutoff, to include the cutoff, I guess, I put in the specific appliance.
Right.
You know, so
If the water heater thermostat's got a problem, you report it in the water heater section. If the shutoff valve for the water heater has a problem, you can put it in both, but it probably should go in the gas distribution section, because like Stephen's saying, it's from the shut. Most people consider it from the shutoff back.
yeah. And then like enforcement said, if your line is a moving target, and you
Right.
include that in gas, as long as it's in the report somewhere.
Good. Here's a question about the report. It says, to clarify, I thought I heard you say the form shouldn't be used till February the 1st, but 7-6 REI form is voluntarily starting back in September 21 and becomes mandatory February the 1st. Did we mishear y'all?
No,
Yeah,
that's true.
You can use the report, the new report starting last September. One of my inspectors pointed this out to me because I had it messed up in my mind. You can use the report starting last September. You have to start using it Tuesday the 1st. The SOPs, the standards of practice, do not go into law until February 1st. So you got the report that you can start using last September. You got the SOPs that you do not use until Tuesday the 1st.
You don't.
February the
have to.
1st, you better be using the new 7-6
Yeah.
form.
I mean, the idea was most of the changes in the SOP were enhancements.
Right.
There wasn't really anything that went away. So if you started using the report form in August, theoretically, you could use the SOP because they're all above, at that point, above the standard.
Correct.
And the idea was if you did not do something that's on the new SOP before February 1st, you were not responsible to enforcement for it until February 1st.
Right.
So I mean, a lot of the stuff on there, recording water pressure, or no, water pressure over 80 wasn't a deficiency, and it's still not today till Tuesday. Most of us did. So we were doing the new SOP. We've been doing the new SOP in some areas for 20 years.
Yes.
So now, yeah, we've been in front of it. Now we slowed up, and now the SOP's beating on our heels. It caught up with us in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Changes. We just love those, don't we?
Well, I mean, a lot of it came around in the change. You know, when we look at the SOP, we look at each other and it's like, what is it that everybody is already doing, or 90% or 80% of the inspectors are already doing? That's a good idea that we might as well go ahead and corral the other 10 or 15% and make it a standard.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's anything in the new SOP that nobody's ever done before.
Right.
Yeah, nothing really unusual about it.
No, most of the guys
Here's
that have been doing
question.
it. Yeah.
So would you check a log ladder valve in a fireplace if a key is present. I think they're saying, would you light the fireplace, if I understand it right?
Yeah, I mean,
Have to.
that, yeah, you got to somehow demonstrate if it's performing. But we kind of leave, that's where it comes into the specialty tools, which you have to determine, let me go down the fireplace section, how, if that device is working.
Well, we're not required to light pilots or anything
Correct.
like that.
Right,
Some insurance companies frown on us lighting a fire
right,
in the inspection. So on a gas fireplace log like that, I'll usually turn the valve, see if I've got gas. I won't
Correct.
light it.
correct. Yeah. Yeah, so the fireplace, here's what you're required to report as deficient in the fireplace chimneys. Build up creosote in accessible areas of the firebox and flues, present in combustible materials in near proximity of the firebox opening, the absence of fire blocking at the attic penetration and chimney, or accessible, deficiency in a damper, hearth, gas fixture installed in the fireplace not associated with gas distribution. So if you have a gas fixture in there, then you need to somehow determine if it's operating or installed or functioning, and if not, report it. So it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. Like Paul said, most of us just turn the gas on and determine if there's gas present in it. Some people probably still light them, but it's not required.
So
There
yeah,
are-
I've heard
there's
horror
some-
stories about them use lighting them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some general limitations, like not you needing an open flame to start something up.
Right,
But in the limitations, it also says unless specifically required. So there's some things you do that are specific to that element. That's but yeah, do you have to light things? Yeah, it's never been required. You've never had to have matches as part of your minimum equipment.
It's kind of like carrying a hammer, right?
No, some of them have electronic ignition. Okay, that's a little different. It's just you don't have to apply an open flame. Well, if I'm
Right.
doing a clicker on a stove, I mean a clicker on a stove or a fireplace, I'm not applying an open flame. It has an
Right.
electronic ignition, maybe manual or automatic.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
different.
Yeah, I like the remote controls myself.
yeah,
As long as you carry batteries for
Someone's
them.
asking in 503.5.231 SOP is it going to revise the required documenting of the location of a gas meter and type of gas distribution piping material? Is it revised to require?
We do have to say the location of the gas meter. That is a new thing. Where's the gas section there, Sean?
but there,
Yeah,
And the
location,
gas
location of the,
piping material.
yeah, it's similar to the water section. Location of water meter, location of gas meter, type of water piping, type of gas piping.
yeah. And this came from the inspectors community adding this because we felt like the people that were on the call felt like it would be important. It's important for the consumer to know where these shutoffs are, even if they're not going to operate them. You know, most consumers are not going to operate a gas meter, but it's good knowledge to know where your gas meter is in case you have some type of emergency or something, or someone needs to know where it is. We also talked, there was questions that came in a TREC over the fall that were, okay, well, what if you have a private propane tank and there's no gas meter? Well, some of those have metering devices on there, so you can report the location of the metering device. But like Stephen has said all along, if there's no meter or you cannot locate a meter, you just report that. Unable to locate, not present, however you want to report those situations.
If you're inspecting a house with a water well, don't have a water meter.
Right,
You just say it's not present or not visible.
right. Let's see, any other questions? I can't see the chat.
Yeah, it says if you call out, for example, let's see, we got that one. I scooted up on, let me go down a little bit, I'm sorry. Where'd it go?
I see. And then the temperature differential have to shoot across the coils. It's up to you to determine how you want to do the temperature differential. If you want to take it at the coils, you know, by putting thermometers in the ducts or however you choose to do it, it's up to you. But again, that kind of falls back to the general provisions where it's up for you. Some people are going to shoot guns, use infrared guns. Some are going to try to take it at the coil. There's various different ways to do that.
Yeah, if your intent, like we are, is to find the temperature drop across the coils,
Right.
the best thing is to do the closest supply you can get to. That way
Right.
you're minimizing potentially the negative effect of a damaged distribution system.
Right.
You know, we're not authorized to poke holes in plenums. I know I've seen where somebody else has a hole already in the plenum, maybe in an Energy Star. I can stick a temperature gauge in it. I didn't make the hole, but
Right.
you know, realistically,
Sure
you got
you
to.
did.
You're supposed to be in the next section on ducts. The best way to tell if the distribution system, the duct system is working, is shoot every one of them. So you do a return,
Yeah.
and then you shoot the temperatures on every single supply. And if everything's working right, they're going to all be within a couple of degrees. And you're going to use that, probably the best one, which is the closest one most likely. But if you get one kind of like Sesame Street that's not like the others, you know you got a problem with that duct, and that put that on your to-do list when you go in the attic, see what's up.
Yeah. Steven brings up a good point, because you can find sometimes on these new homes where a return air will be connected to a supply, and you can pick up, you know, you'll have a supply air that's showing 80 degrees because they accidentally piped it into the return side. So it's a good idea to shoot all the ducts, but
Yeah,
again,
shoot all the registers, because I've shot some and they're attic temperature, and you look in the flashlight, they never connect. I'm looking at the roof deck through the register.
yeah. And then would like clarification on specifics of AFCI and TR, tamper resistant outlets in operation.
Yep. I mean, it tells you you're talking like the absence of tamper resistant and 5.5 feet and less in the standard.
Yeah, let me see can you clarify what you're wanting clarification on? You want to talk about the SOP and
Where are they at?
here, I'll go down to the arc fault. So we added the arc fault in there again during this revision update. We decided, you know, we're going to bring everything up, and that's kind of our goal is as a committee is to look at these every few years, so that like arc fault have been around for many years, and they're just now making their debut in our standards of practice. So we you know, we want to look at these more often, like 240s. This used to read 240s, and we updated because to reflect how the code is reading now, where it's 250 volt appliances. But let me get down to the arc fault section. So we basically initially we were trying to come out with a word or a phrase that would move with the standards as standards change. And if we did that, it was going to require us to basically adopt a code, say, well, this is the code that we use as TREC. So we, you know, initially we took it to the committee saying it was generic. It was very, the AFCI, GFCI was very generic, and we were trying to let it flow with the standards. But we felt like that full committee and visitors felt like that we should specifically talk about the location. So we just basically copied word for word. So here, like the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, we copied word for word out of the current IRC. And same with the ground fault protection, all that was taken word for word. So here's the arc fault, the absence of arc fault polling locations, and we took these all out of the current code.
And the arc faults were there once before. For a little while, we took them right back out.
Yeah, correct.
Little ahead of its time.
Yeah. Again, like, you know, testing, you know, making sure they're working. It's up to the, you know, manually test and install an accessible smoke detector, but we're not telling you what device you have to use to test them. So let's see. All right, we got does that answer the AFCI question?
I think you probably did. If they got more, they can come back with on the chat with us again. All right, someone's asking, does static water pressure have to be a specific number or in a range?
Well, like Steven said, you know, we used to have 60 to 80 and then a lower number, then both numbers got pulled out, right, Steven?
I don't know that it was ever there. If it did, it predated me. I
Well,
know
60 to 80 was in there when it first came in there because we deal with low water pressure in Houston all the time. And so,
no, I think
Was it
40 to 80.
yes, 40, it was
plumbing
40.
code.
40,
Yeah.
you're right. 40 to 80. What is that right,
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, 40 to 80 is what's been normal on it.
Yeah, and then they took it out. Now it's just anything over 80. So I mean, obviously, if you have low water pressure in the home, you're going to report that, and that's in other areas. But here's what we're talking about specifically, and they're saying so the range is, it can't be over 80 when you take a thing, or you have to report it deficient.
With your highly calibrated rain soft gauge. Yeah.
Your
So
dollar,
so
$12 gauge.
the idea, and I've tested, I put 4 brand new brand gauges on a 4-way splitter and they vary 10 degrees. So,
Yeah.
but the idea is the low side should be caught with the flow test of two fixtures simultaneously.
Yeah.
So you may, you know, because of low pressure, now that we have these ultra low flow fixture ends, you know, like on faucets and stuff, they might still perform at 40 or below 40.
Yeah.
Back when we had you know, the 25 gallon a minute shower heads, you might have a problem.
The simple thing is run the shower and flush the commode. The water drops, somebody's gonna be upset at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you got the shower running and you flush the commode and it kicks out of the shower mode because there's not enough pressure for the diverter, you got a problem.
Yeah, and you're gonna hear about it.
Yep.
Okay, changes were made to the electrical section, branch circuits, connected devices, fixtures concerning bonding and grounding, specifically for appliances and metal pipes. So provision was added. Let me go down here. Added to the new gas section requiring the inspector verify bonding of the gas distribution system, but there's no mention about verifying it. I keep losing my mouse here. Let me find it again. The gas distribution system, but there's no mention about verifying bonding for metal gas or metal water distribution pipes. Can you elaborate? Why was this changed?
Well, the bonding for the gas lines primarily has been generated out of the CSST. Was when the CSST recommendations came out, whatever years ago, about the bonding. That's when I think it started creeping into our standards. We talked to enforcement again during our meetings. So it talks about, I'll finish that statement, then we'll look at it. We talked about enforcement with that are they expecting, would they expect an inspector to do, you know, advanced testing to ensure the bonding has been truly bonded, you know, putting different meters on and stuff like that. And that's not what's required. So we're basically looking for visible bonding clamps, indicating that we're not doing any testing, continuity testing or anything like that to determine if it is installed, performing properly. And then also in the electrical system, it does talk about bonding and grounding. So I guess you could take these and put them with the metal water lines. If you see the lack of bonding at the water lines, then you would be within the standard to call that out.
All right. It says that we're required to report the gas distribution if it's not properly bonded.
Correct. Let's see.
Can pictures line up, bleed over into the left button column? Left button, I guess we're talking about the report.
Let me.
Can pictures line up or bleed over into the left button column?
So you're talking about like maybe pictures underneath this?
I don't have a clear understanding
Yeah.
of it. So,
I think the pictures I don't think there's any restriction on how far the text or pictures come over this way in the report, as long as they're contained within the report.
Yeah, as long as they're in between the comment and the next section heading. They can be 3 wide. Some people put them
Right.
3 wide, 4 wide.
as the report now has the other section, electrical and HVAC, what items are intended to go in here?
You can put, so we did this for, to be unified, because some sections on the old report had other, like, so the structural in the other, the last report, 7-5, had other in it, but then other sections did not. So we just came through here to put them in there to make it consistent. You could put the doorbell. We had a conversation about that the other day, I believe, Paul, and there was an email chain going around about, could you put the doorbell in here? Yes, that's acceptable. So you can list other systems in here that would be related to the HVAC. So maybe if you wanted to put something about humidifiers, if you wanted to test those, you could put them in here. So we just made more housekeeping to be consistent. The plumbing section always had other, which is where a lot of people were putting gas problems. So that was added. And we added an appliance section because there's a lot more built-in appliances that people might be testing, and also has it in here.
And talking with TREC staff yesterday, the other location was primarily intended for things above the standard that you
Right.
wanted to put in the appropriate section.
Right.
You know, if you had some extra, like, PV system you're inspecting, that's an other.
Yes. You could put the whole house vacuum system in here, or you could put it in the optional. So,
Yeah, there was discussion, do I put it in the, if it's an electrical above the code that I'm doing, do I put it in electrical or optional? The preference was the appropriate category, but optional is always there also.
this got in here, this other built-in appliances was put in here because there was somewhat desire coming from people in the community that wanted to add built-in refrigerators. So if anything was built in, we would put it in here. They wanted to have SOPs for all those various, and the list can just go on and on and on. We could have a built-in refrigerator section here. We could have
Outdoor kitchen.
ice machines, outdoor cooking equipment. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. So we just came up with this, other built-in appliances, and we elected not to create SOPs for all those different systems. So if you're going to check an outdoor grill, you probably want to be able to, demonstrate some kind of competency again and report how you checked it. I did an operational test on the grill. It achieved 350 degrees when I turned the burners on, or whatever, have an infrared picture or something like that, just demonstrating the thing was operational.
Yeah, or cook the steak just fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea. Start cooking on these inspections.
All right, another question for you guys is, can a realtor's information be added to the first page of the report?
I don't think you can. I don't believe that any of this, I mean, you could put it down here, additional information provided, but I don't believe you can put it here. You could put it on your cover sheet if you wanted to. You can't modify this box. I mean, you could add multiple inspectors in here, but I don't think there's any allotment to add a
And
realtor.
some software, if you put more inspectors, it just wraps another line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know some softwares do a HTML format, and it has pictures or the information is realtor in front of it, but that's not the TREC report.
Right. So you could do that if you wanted to do something similar that you could put on the cover sheet.
Here's one that says, are we required to use the DCA 6 prescriptive residential wood deck construction guide to inspect wood decks?
No, I mean, you need to, we don't provide, you go by the standards of practice. I can pull up this deck section. But no, you wouldn't have to be using that. That would be above the standards. So
beyond the scope.
Yeah.
Okay, it says cooling equipment. Can you elaborate on the new requirements for reporting extraneous factors or conditions present on the day of the inspection that would adversely impact the delta T or otherwise performing unit? Provide us an example.
Well, this was something that Scott talked a lot about during our meetings, since he has a lot more expertise in ACs. And pull up the cooling section right here. So we get down here. So what he was talking a lot about, like if you have a day where it's 105 degrees and 99% humidity, you might not always be able to. Your drops might change. Your ability to achieve what you perceive as adequate cooling in the house might change. And so that's what we were talking about, is as the temperatures and the climate outside changes, it can affect the performance of the system. And he used a lot of examples like that. I mean, the bottom line is the most common thing we use is if it's below 60 degrees, we're not testing them unless we get permission. But when we get into the lower 60s and stuff, it can affect the drop where it's not as reflective. And so if you felt like that you ran into that situation, you got a 14-degree drop on a day that you felt like the weather was affecting your drop, you can report that in the report. Do we want to just give people the flexibility, if they have a lot of experience or education in AC stuff, that they can use that to justify why they didn't call out a 14-degree drop?
Okay. All right, under the plumbing, it says, so under the 40 PSI water pressure isn't reported now, or is it still reported?
It's not called out specifically in the standards, but if you had, a problems with functional flow inside the house, I'm trying to find exactly where it is, but basically we report deficient if we have problems with functional flow, performance of fixtures and faucets. Trying to figure out where. Here it is.
Yeah.
Water supply as determined by viewing functional flow and 2 fixtures operated simultaneously. So like Paul was saying earlier, if you're running the sinks and you flush the toilet and the pressure drops down to nothing, you're going to report that deficient. But if you have 40 outside or 38 outside and you get inside and everything works great, you're not required by the standards to report that deficient. I mean, if you wanted to go above, if you have experience and say 38 is not okay, and you wanted to go above the standards, you can report it, but it's not required specifically in the standards.
Good. All right, AFCI question. We report if they are missing from any of those locations because lack of safety features aren't grandfathered. But should we add a comment about a home that may have been built before the AFCIs were required?
You don't have, you're not required to, but I think it's not a bad idea to do that. To maybe, like Stephen was saying earlier, maybe notate that this home was constructed. If you're doing like we go down to Galveston, we do houses in Galveston that are 150 years old. None of that stuff even existed. So reports are littered with it, but we usually have a conversation and make some verbiage in our reports that a lot of these standards were not around when this home was built, and we're just informing you that there are some options out there for.
Good. Sean, I want to tell you, we've got 163 people online with us doing the webinar. I think that's outstanding. And we're not getting to your presentation on it, but we're getting a lot of questions answered. So I hope you don't mind the questions being popped to you.
No, it's fine because we're bouncing all around the standard, so we're covering everything anyway. So it's perfect.
Good. All right. This one has a question, says pre-listing inspections. Clients want a brief walkthrough without a report, simply placing blue tape on items. Is this allowed?
No. That's been a hot topic at TREC, and there probably will be something coming out in advisors and stuff like that, but it was brought up at one TREC meeting of these walkthrough inspections. And these have come up for years and years. People wanting to do maybe $150 or something like that, where they just walk through and tell the seller, I would probably fix that. If the house is going to be involved in a real estate transaction, you have to follow the SOPs and generate a report.
Yeah. Even on a pre-listing, if they say I'm thinking about listing it, well, then it gets a TREC report.
Yeah, they call you and say, I just want to know what's wrong with my house. Well, you can do whatever you want. The house is not listed, and they just want you to walk through with them. and it's not listed and they're not mentioning anything about a real estate transaction, there's no realtor there, realtor sign. You know, we just want to know what's wrong with our house, just part of maintenance. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. All right, if the other section is not used, can it be deleted from the form, or is that considered alteration of the form? If the other section, in other words, I guess the bottom of each section where it says others.
Well, I know, Stephen, do you have an opinion about that? I need to get clarification from enforcement on that, because we used to be able to remove the other section if it wasn't anything in there. But I think the core of the report has to stay intact. And then when you get to the optional, you don't need to print the optional. If you didn't do any of this, you don't have to reflect this on your report, the optional section. But I believe this has to stay intact, but I will get a firm answer back to y'all.
Yeah, it's just another checkbox anyway.
Yeah.
All right, can we clarify where AFCI is required in home? Well, I think we pretty well listed that out, didn't we?
It's a bullet list.
Yeah.
Got 13 locations.
Yeah.
Oh, we're requiring dryer outlets to be GFCI covered.
Yes. So we just took the code and went specifically through their bathroom receptacles. It goes on and on and on.
There's 11 locations for those, and laundry room. Yeah, laundry room. So if you're in the building code side, those are GFCI now anyway.
Okay. So if this is another good one, guys. So if electrical outlets in a bedroom is within 6 feet of the bathroom sink through door, is it required to be GFCI protected?
You carry a 6-foot string with you, and you go from the edge of the sink and touch an outlet. There's no exception that says you don't have to be protected.
Yeah.
And it's through it. Yeah. For a while there, it had doors, and now it's through doors. So yeah, it's possible to have a bathroom lavatory and a hallway outlet within 6 feet.
So get you a 6-foot string.
That's it. It doesn't take a lot of space in your bag.
Take your boot shoelaces off and measure it.
There's a 6-foot shoelace is very durable, and it's a great picture. Just don't be sticking it in the outlet.
Oh, you take all the fun out of it, Steve. All right. It says, is there a word template version? Someone else asked this earlier.
Not that I know of. I know there was some conversations at TREC about that, but I do not think that they've generated a Word version as of now. Yeah, no,
I've asked TREC for that myself, and they only have a PDF version. But if you have a PDF software, you can convert it to a Word doc and use it. Some have told me they've had problems with it. Steve and I talked about this the other day, and I think Steve has a clean copy of Word document he sent me. So if anybody needs that, if you'll just email me, paul@internachi.org, I will send you a copy of that Word document. Okay, let me go down here. Then we got all kinds of questions. That's good, guys. Yeah. Thank you for being involved. Those of you that are in attendance, we appreciate you being here. Can we remove the name of the sponsor line at the top of the report?
I don't think you can remove that. I think this all has to stay the same core, so you just NA on that. But I'll verify that too.
I think you can. I mean, I don't want to disagree with you, but
okay.
I think that if you're not sponsoring somebody, if you're the only inspector, I think you can. Okay. But I will tell you, if you have more than one inspector on site with you, all those inspectors' names need to be listed on your report with their license number. Yeah, that was a problem we talked about. Yeah, I leave this on mine because I sponsor a bunch of guys, so I've never had to question it myself. So you're probably right, Paul. Yeah, if you sponsor some, you don't want to take it off and back on. It's easier to leave it on to add it back in later. Will there be a recording of the seminar? Yes, we are recording it. You can go to the InterNACHI website, and the recording will be listed. You can download or rewatch it online or download it for your computer. Let me go down here. Whoops. I have a quick click software, but it's not that good. Okay. Probably ought to change then. Okay, the verbiage on the electrical section was borrowed from the IRC code. That, of course, referenced the NEC code. The NEC code is updated every 2 years. Which year of the NEC did the verbiage get borrowed from?
Well, we took the new 2022 IRC is what we went through to use our to come up with our language. So we pulled that up and we just copied and pasted. So we did not open up the NEC. I know, I understand what you're saying, but we used the IRC residential 1 to 4 family.
Okay, someone says, sorry, I was having volume issues. Did you say dryer plug was or was not GFCI required since it's in the laundry room?
Yes.
Yes, it is required.
It has been for a few years in the building code.
Okay, somebody wanting my email address, send it to Paul, Paul at InterNACHI.org. Let's see, I think that's the end of our questions. Scott, you're gonna have to come up with more to talk about now, it looks like.
There we go.
Did y'all, I know I stepped out for a minute. Did y'all talk about modifying the report form for like breaking up items like in the electrical, making GFCI sections?
We talked about, if you wanted to.
It's come up a few times.
Yeah, we talked about doorbells and stuff down here, but are you talking about like adding a GFCI here?
Yeah. So I know somebody had asked one of the TREC attorneys, and the question in my mind may not have been worded real good on what they wanted. So I went with a much more detailed and talked with them, what's today, Friday, Wednesday. So on this report form that you see on the screen, the intent was the other is for items above the code, above the standard, above the SOP that you want to add, and you put they're electrically related, but you want to do them and put them in a report. That's what the other's for. If you want to break out, say, the branch circuits to have a section for GFCIs, AFCIs, or something like that, you're not really following the rules by creating a C and putting GFCIs and a D in our fault, because they're all under B in the rules. So all those things that are listed that you inspect in section B, branch circuits and devices, still need to be under B because that's where they are in the SOP. What the correct way would be to make a subcategory under B, like B1 could be your GFCIs, B2 be a arc faults, and however you want to do it, but they would still come under B rather than having an electrical system section that has like A through F, because all those things like the GFCI and stuff, they're referenced in the rules under 535, was it 222, and you'd work your way down to B, and all those things are supposed to still be under the section for B, and you just make B1, B2, B3 for those type of things. Some software is a little easier to do that. I've seen some of them on the Facebook website where they've done it very well to the point where I'm trying to duplicate it in my report because it looked good.
Yep.
Let's see, I had someone email me a couple of questions. Let me see if I can go through it. So they're probably answered, but obviously any information you share about what is really expected for gas piping maybe help with some verbiage. How detailed we expected to cover? Are we supposed to know what type of shutoff valves are acceptable? Or does this now open us up to more liability or finding proper bonding? Sounds like disclaimers may be more important. So I've heard talk about new and different kinds of CSST with some not needing to be bonded. And wording on tamper resistant receptacles seems difficult. almost sound like we would have the entire house as deficient, such as receptacles under kitchen cabinets or mounted receptacles under the eaves or in the garage ceiling. That's a loaded bunch of questions for you guys.
Yeah. And you know, if you're routinely inspecting in a neighborhood that's built in the 50s, you're going to have a lot of those things, because the consumer kind of does need to know there's no GFCIs in this house. There's no smoke detectors, smoke alarms in this house. You know, and the idea that you give them a clean report might be a little, you know, false sense of security. So you're addressing those safety items. And tamper resistant, yeah, anything below, the idea is 5.5 feet they used. I figure if you can reach over 5.5 feet, you're probably old enough to know not to stick the bobby pin in the outlet.
I
So
wouldn't guarantee that one, Steve.
No.
I agree with Paul.
no, it's so a lot of those things we have dealt with. I don't know how many times I've explained why an electrical panel in a closet's a deficiency, because I know they're not going to move it, but I just want them to know it's a hazard. It's listed as a hazardous location, and if they want to know, here's why. So,
and the consumer might not move it, but they might not store a bunch of stuff right against them. You know,
yeah,
once you give them that knowledge.
Well, the idea is you give them a report, it lists deficiencies of things broke. It also lists deficiencies of things that are a hazard that, you know, do they want to accept all those hazards?
Right.
If they do, if they're acceptable, then fine. You know, we've done our job. We've provided them the information to make a decision on buying the house.
And part of the you need to understand that part of the desire of TREC is to, or goals of TREC is to represent and protect the consumer. And so these items are considered, because people will say, well, you're not doing, it says up here you're not doing a code inspection, so why are you calling all these codes? All the codes that we typically talk about are safety items that TREC has taken a stance that they want the consumer to understand. Maybe they don't know anything about it, but they need to understand you don't have a smoke detector here, and it's not as safe as other homes are. So you should try to install one or take action to correct that. Just like, I mean, we haven't talked much about windows.
Fall protection.
But we talked about fall. Here we go, fall protection. So we added this year, the absence of fall protection. It is a code, but the reason we included it is because in our standards of practice, because of the safety issue.
Most of the things that are added to code are added for a very sad reason.
Right.
And that was one of them. And, you know, it stands to reason that we would advise them that you don't have that safety feature. And you'll see a lot of those things in there. And to say, yeah, this is not a code inspection, but it's obvious to anybody. You study the code to take the test, and you know, water heaters 18 inches off the ground. We just didn't pull that out of our back pocket. You know, it's obvious. We use the code as a basis on whether or not things that, you know, that we all determined. I say we all. A lot of these have been here a long time, and they're probably a mix of things that people on staff thought we should have, although they don't have that expertise. It's the old committee members. You know, a lot of these things came about and have been modified over the last 30 years.
And, you know, like Steve's talking about the water heater, this, the temperature failed to operate. So this comes up every time we look at the standards of practice. I'm not a fan of testing these. But the bottom line is me as the chair, this right here.
We're there to know if it's not working.
Right, and me as a committee member, it's difficult to tell the commissioners or TREC or anybody else, yeah, we need to take this out, you know, because granted, a lot of them leak after you test them, and there's difficulties in testing them. But if one of these tanks fails because these valves aren't working, it results in a lot of bad things happening. And so that's why this continues to stay in there, is we can't bring ourselves, you know, every time we've talked about this, we talk about removing it and it ends up back in there.
Kind of hard to argue. You don't want to test something because it's going to fail. And, you know, that's the whole purpose of the home inspection, is to find things that are not performing.
Right.
So the client knows. And to say, I don't want to test something because I know it's going to break, or it was broke. I identified that it was broke. There's a big difference.
And
We've all broken things. We've also discovered things that were broke.
and if you don't test them,
You don't know.
if you do not text them, there is a way to depart from that. That's TREC has said. You can inform the client in writing, or, you know, however you want to do it, as soon as practical, that I do not test T&P valves. And that gives them the right, you know, in the transaction, it's okay, I'm going to hire somebody that does, or that's fine with me, I'll still use you as an inspector.
And there's a difference between a departure and something you're not doing because it's safety related.
Right.
You know, I know I don't walk on 12 pitch roofs, but it's not because I don't like roofs, it's because I don't like hitting the ground. It's not safe. So you may have things that you never do that 9 out of 10 inspectors do. Now we've got a departure that you probably need to tell the client.
Right.
If you line up 10 inspectors and none of them do it, I mean, so the difference is are you departing because you don't want to do it, or are you departing because it's not safe to do?
Correct.
You know, if it's different if you show up to a house and when you drove there, there wasn't anything you were expecting to not be able to do, and you showed up and there's something you can't do. That's a departure that you tell them as soon as practicable. If when you're driving to that house, you know there's something in that house that you never do, that's the one that you have to advise them and make sure they know, or you don't start the inspection. That's the new change, is if you have a departure that you routinely don't do, and it's not because it's unsafe, it's just you don't like to do them, then that triggers the advise before you begin the inspection. So they have an opportunity to say, you know, 9 out of 10 inspectors do that, I'm going to reach out to one of those other 9. And that's all that was for.
Yeah.
I saw a question where reflecting on the walkthrough inspections, what part of the standards, this is some of it right here, where it's talking about when the standards of practice go into play, and requirements for a real estate inspector conducted on a 1 to 4 family dwelling.
The downside of having a license
Yeah.
is if it's part of a buy or a sell and you're licensed, you're going to be hard pressed to go do a walkthrough inspection. And because you're an inspector, you're at the house, you're inspecting. Now, it doesn't say you can't do a report and just have lots of NAs.
Right. That's a good point.
I mean, but to walk through and write up your notes on a paper towel and give it to them, and that's it, you're probably opening yourself up for trouble.
Yeah, it's just
that was the good old days, guys.
Yeah.
You had to have good.
Like Steven said, if you just want to go check the foundation, just NA on everything else, and you put why you didn't check it, and you just report to the foundation only.
That's all they hired me for. Now we came up with the single item primarily for the Chinese drywall guys years ago.
Yeah.
Where we kind of carved a niche out to where you could do any one of the major items and not required to use the report. And you could have your own letterhead report. And you have that little footer that says, this is not a full home inspection, in case nobody's ever seen one and they don't realize why you're not making comments about the foundation when you're out there looking at Chinese drywall or roof.
Right. Good discussions, guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Several questions popped up here. Sean, Steve says, is the SOP that's effective February the 1st, is there a copy that we can download?
Yeah,
Where did they get that?
It's on the website.
TREC's website.
Yeah, it's on the TREC website.
Yeah, it has a watermark on it, but that's gonna come off.
That comes off Monday night. Or if
Or
not.
maybe
Sunday,
Tuesday.
well, Mr. Tony, I think said, Monday night, it'll update.
All right, yeah, I got a question. Text to me. It says, ask Steve and Sean to clarify what Sean said about AFCIs being grandfathered. Do we report the lack of these as deficient per TREC?
Yes. There's always been the concern of grandfathering life safety items. A grandfather 2x4 rafters if they're performing. A lot of things are performance. Life safety, these are not performance per se. So you've got a list of absence for arc faults. You have a list for absence of GFCIs. And the lack of them in that area is a deficiency. Not that anything broke. Like I say, it just raised the life safety bar, and the intent is to give the client, the information that they need, especially if they're comparing a 2015 house and a 2020 house.
Yeah.
And they're wondering why one cost, a little more than the other one. Well, the new one probably has more life safety items.
And I think that was one of the motivations for the report change. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, when we changed this from repair, the check mark being repair to deficient.
Needs a repair was the old one.
Because need a repair told everybody, okay, you don't have whatever we're calling out smoke detectors, so you have to repair that. So we changed it as deficient because we're trying to soften the word to make people understand no one's forcing you to fix this, but you need to understand this is not present in this home.
And it's in the preamble. You don't have to fix anything. Right. The idea is what you're buying.
Because we got an email, TREC got an email comments from an electrician, I think in San Antonio.
Oh yeah.
Who's upset about the arc fault, but we all understand that there's some panels that can't, older panels that can't accept it and stuff like that. There's hurdles to installing it, and no one's telling them they have to put it in there. This is just information for the consumer. And it's probably in your best interest to have a conversation with them about this so they know, hey, this is all in the house. There's going to be some code stuff. There's going to be some safety stuff that comes up. And if they have questions about it, to get with you. So it's not a mandatory fix.
Yeah, modify your comment to say just that. These are items that we know weren't in your house when you built it because it's old enough. The guy that invented arc faults wasn't born yet. Okay? So these are items that are in homes now, and we want to make you aware that they are not present in your home. And we do that by listing them where they're absent, however you want to say, where they're absent or where they're not present.
Absence,
it says absence.
Yeah.
I tell them where they're not present. Yeah, it's
right.
But that's the whole intent. And you're going to have, if you routinely do neighborhoods that are 10, 15, 20 years old, like we did with the arc faults years ago, it may be a standard comment that's pre-populated when you open every report. You just got to remember to take it out if they are there.
Right.
It's true. Yeah.
That happens.
Well, I think we all kind of do that.
Yep.
All right. Here's another question. It says, doesn't section 535.223 bracket 3 bracket K say that some sections of the report, the other part words may indeed be deleted, or has this changed?
The word other is the only thing you can. So in the main body of the report, if you don't have any others, I believe you can still get rid of the word other.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, and I didn't have a great.
Yeah. So you just because you don't have a stove or an oven, I guess something like that, or microwave, doesn't mean you can delete the microwave because it reorders the appliances, which are specifically identified in the rules by that, A, B, C, or D.
Yeah, I was going to get clarification on that, Stephen, but I believe,
Yeah, the others, the word other and the whole optional you can delete.
Right, optional for sure.
Yeah, I think Steve.
But everything else that has a number, it's dedicated, has a place in the rules, it's supposed to be there. And those don't get reordered. You know, I know that the electrical B section is branch circuits. I can't go in and make, you know, A, B, and C is main panel, entrance panel, sub panel, and branch circuits gets to D. It messes up the reference in the rules.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you do A1 for service entrance panels, A2 for sub panels. You know, you could break it up like that for readability and being able to kind of help identify those things. That's, you know, that's just, I want to say comes with experience, but it comes with explaining. If there's something I have to explain 50% of the houses, I'm going to try to fix it in the report.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Seeing many new construction homes with pressure reducing valves and tankless water heaters, they never have an expansion tank. He says, I write this up, but builders always fight it. What's y'all's opinion?
It's in the standard. It's non-enforcement by probably the AHJ. I mean, we see that a lot. You know, there's a difference when a builder says, oh, the city doesn't require it.
Right.
Usually I ask them to rephrase it. The city just didn't enforce it.
Yeah.
There's a big difference. We're not there to try to enforce everything they miss, but if it's in our SOP, we put it in there.
Yeah.
I know there's some PRVs that have the capability to relieve pressure. It's really hard to figure those out without digging them up and looking at the data plate. So they just kind of said expansion tanks.
I see the next question about the valve stops. I think that's directed right here. You're not required to operate main valves or branch shutoff valves.
Doesn't mean you can't. A lot of those are restrictions where you don't have to.
Right, but you can.
Which you can.
Because this, remember guys, this is a baseline. This is the foundation.
It's a minimum.
You can go above it. If you go below it, you got to tell them. If you go above it, you know, you just need to be competent. So.
And a lot of times you wish you hadn't gone above whenever you do.
I know.
All right, so can you advise the client in the service agreement or pre-inspection email that you're not going to say not walk the roof, or do you have to verbally inform them?
In writing, I think it is a good practice.
Do you routinely not walk the roof? I've run across an inspector who doesn't walk any roofs, and he tells the client he's just too old. I don't do roofs.
Yeah.
And that
Stop
would
talking about me, Steve.
I didn't want to give any names, but that would qualify with a new trigger on, you know, before you know, at first contact, before you do the inspection, your client needs to know you don't do roofs because it might be very important to them.
Exactly.
The question was talking about the service agreement is, I would probably do it in the body of the email and the service agreement if you want to, just to make sure that you have some kind of, you know, evidence that you did notify them in case they ever generated a complaint.
Staff gave some examples yesterday that I thought were maybe on the fringe of, you know, on your website. I don't walk roofs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was kind of, well, I don't think that everybody reads the website or something, but in the contract, in the inspection agreement would be ideally place to put it, but not, inspection agreements aren't required by TREC. So I know people that don't have inspection agreements. You just got to have some other way to make sure they know.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't require, you know, you could tell them verbally, it doesn't mean you have to get a response that they understand it. That was specifically, you know, there's not a, you know, a requirement for them to respond. But if you have it in your inspection agreement and they sign your inspection agreement, and it's not because it's like number 4 font somewhere hidden in somewhere, that basically would meet the intent of the standard.
Good. Speaking of inspection agreements, I want to tell everybody January the 29th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Ben Garrison and Joe Danielier with InterNACHI's insurance. They're going to be discussing insurance for inspectors, claims, inspection agreements, seller's complaints, TREC representation, tail coverage insurance, and actually overall benefits of having InterNACHI.
Use the last of the milk, so when I drop you off, I'm gonna run to HEB and get a few things like milk and fresh bread.
Steven, you're not on mute.
And more of the,
Steve,
you like
have
that
fun,
birthday
man.
cake one or whatever it is? Okay.
Let's see if we can.
And
Steven,
I might just buy a few of them because it's easier to use. And you get out as much as you want or as little as you want.
Bye, Steve.
Steven,
All right. Someone's asking, can we get the pocket SOP for the 7E REI 7-6?
yeah, TREC's working on that, so they'll have that out. There looks like some questions about it causing damage for the TPE valve.
A lot easier.
You know, we use the term, you know.
Steve, you need to mute yourself.
Steven. So we use a term, you know, if it failed during inspection, so, or failed during testing. So if we're testing a bathtub on the second floor and we pull the stopper in, it starts to leak into the ceiling. No one's excited about that, but it's not something that we negligently did to cause that water to overflow. You know, if it leaks in the drain. So it's always a conversation. Anybody can claim, you know, come after you for whatever. But typically on the water heater, if it continues to leak afterwards, it would be something you would want to notify everybody involved in. But I don't necessarily feel like that you know, personally, I don't think you're liable, but I think anybody can say you're liable for anything. I mean, the sellers are never excited about having us in their houses, and they're blaming us for problems all the time anyway. So
yeah, well, if you're going to trip that thing, you better know where the exit is and make sure the pipe's connected before you off that little lever. Otherwise, you can run into that.
Yeah, you got to be very careful. I've replaced a ton of them.
I have a inspector asking, can you add items to the report form that are not listed in the SOP?
You can put it in the other. Yeah, that's kind of what the other's for. So if you had electrical stuff you want to talk about, surround sound or whatever, you can put it here. You know, anything extra, or if you feel like it's, you know, something really obscure or whatever, you want to put it in the optional section under other. Mosquito, you know, mosquito systems. I see people talking about that in here sometimes. I know that you have to be licensed as pest control, but TDA, as far as I know, doesn't have an inspection form for mosquito systems. So, you know, I think people put a lot of stuff in the other.
Yeah, I've got another that has, you know, cabinets or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what the question was asked is, like we have others, can that be changed and you put whatever, say, outdoor or whatever,
rename it
and add another one instead of just G, you go down the alphabet, add a couple other lines. Can they do that on the report?
I think the conversation was, yes, if you're talking about things that are above the SOP, because everything in the SOP has a section. But if it's not in the SOP, then yes, the idea is you add it at the end and you keep the alpha sequence going. You just can't pull something out of a section that's in the SOP and give it its own new one. It would be a sub of wherever it's at.
Yeah.
Someone asked, I don't remember if we answered that or not, can we get the pocket version of the 7-6? That is being done. TREC is working on that.
They actually
printed when they're going to be available, but they should be pretty quick from what I understand.
Yeah, I think they actually printed it for the conference and then they found some errors. And rather than try to give it out and tell everybody what the errors were, they pulled it, they're reprinting it, and they may have it reprinted. So they're working on a distribution system to give them to everybody that wants them at no cost. And some of it might be through the association. Some of it might be just ask for it on the website. They just got to figure out how they're going to do that. But I believe they were supposed to be printed this last week.
Yeah.
The correct.
They had hoped to have them ready for our convention, but it just didn't happen in that time. So we
He
didn't
did
get
print. He did print some, and then they found errors that went. We probably shouldn't be giving these out. They were typo errors, that changes, and some typos that just didn't come out right. And they're also going to. I think they're still going to put a printable one on the website. So if you want to print it yourself, you can.
Good. It says, can you please clarify can we inspect one item such as a roof or foundation and not use the TREC report form?
Yes. Beginning of the SO, yeah. Where are we at? Where it talks about single item. I think it's at the end.
Because I know you don't have to, like, on a reinspect.
Well, it talks about single item inspections. It's after departure. I guess before departure. It's called single item.
There we go. Let's see.
Find it.
No, not yet.
Departure enforcement. It was a protocol for single item. I just printed. That's why I'm going through these pages. I just printed one because I didn't want to scroll through.
I think we probably need to get clarification because I know there's specific language on re-inspections.
Maybe it's at the end. Let me get to the end.
I think the end is just all optional. Yeah,
Okay.
everything administrative. I think it might be in a different.
Yeah, I thought, I need to find out. I believe it was at the end, but we created that single inspection, and it actually gave examples of what it would be. And it would be in a single item, like in the report form, say in the structural part of the report form, you've got foundation, drainage and grading, roof covering. Each one of those is considered a single item. So if I did roof covering or roof, okay. If I did just ceilings and floors, the idea is each one of those is considered a single item, and you could do it without using the form if you wanted. And we'll find the reference for that.
Yeah.
Someone's asking if the SOP that was on the TREC website had the lines drawn through the section that was deleted and all. Is that still available?
I don't believe
the red line.
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
It is in the minutes. So
Yes,
if you go to meetings, you go to the drop-down menu on the far right on meetings, and you go back to one of the meetings like last spring, and the materials for those meetings has the red line copy showing what was struck, what was changed. And if you get the one that probably goes to the TREC commission, that's the one that got approved with the most recent changes. And that's the one they took out all the line throughs and we're looking at here.
So we got about 10. I was just going to skim through here because we didn't hit everything. I was just going to hit the few items we didn't talk about real quick,
and I've got to go. I've got to take somebody to a therapy appointment. It starts in 12 minutes.
Okay.
Have fun, Steve. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Steve.
Okay.
All right. So I'm just going to skim through these, and I know this might generate some questions, but if we run out of time, you can email or whatever. We did some stuff with the doors. So we separated this out because it used to read. It was kind of a run-on sentence. So we separated these into bullet points, basically, for separation between a attached garage and a living space. And then we also put on there, we added the self-closing mechanism because that wasn't in there in the past on the SOPs. Down here we added.
So you're telling me that the garage door from the garage going into the house has to have some type of closing device. So
Yes,
once it's open, it closes itself.
correct.
Just
Those annoying springs.
Yeah.
And then we put all the bullet points in here on how the door has to be constructed for fire rating. The bullet points were always in there. It was just in a sentence that didn't make a lot of sense, so we just clarified. We added the fall protection. We talked about that. That's and then we added, you know, in the fireplace section, we did this in every gas fixture, everything that can have gas in it. We added where is the fireplace? Here we go. We added the comment about a gas fixture. So a gas fixture got to report deficiencies in a gas fixture installed in the fireplace not associated with the gas distribution system. We added that verbiage in almost every section that has could have a gas appliance. We added the 250. We just changed 240 to 250 to reflect what the code reads. We listed out all the locations of the GFCIs. To bring it up.
Just so people know how to test that 240 or 250 volt for like the dryer.
Yes, sir.
What type of tool or instrument do they need, Sean?
Well, again, like we're not specifying the tools in here, but like what I use is just a little pigtail, you know, just to check to make sure there's power there. We wanted to make sure the inspectors didn't have to check for polarity or do a lot of detailed testing on the 250. You just got to make sure there's power there. So I think it's because that one's talking about trip ties. That's the
that little thing you use, the same thing I use too. It's a very inexpensive little thing. It's got a little light on the end of it that says it's hot or not. And 2 wires, you stick them in and find that you've got the 240.
Yeah, and they're cheap. So initially we put the 250 in with this, but this one talks about with the 125 volt receptacles, determining presence of power, correct polarity, presence of grounding. We didn't want the inspector to have to do that with a 250. So we just said, okay, if there's a dryer receptacle, there's no dryer there. You just need to check to determine the presence of power. And we're not going to get involved in all the polarity or if the neutral's separated and all that as far as the SOPs go. Because that came again out of an inspector that was disciplined for not checking one. So we felt like we need to address it in the new standards update. Again, the heater section, we just clarified that, let's see, required right here. Gas leaks in the heating equipment not associated with the gas distribution system. So we just worked hard to try to make sure that people understood if there's a gas leak with the heating equipment, you report it here. If not, you put it in the gas distribution. Then we talked about the drop already, 15 to 22, or fails to cool adequately as determined by other industry accepted methods. So this is all the people that don't want to do drops. You got an or right here. You choose how you want to check a system.
Yeah, but however you check it, you need to tell on the report what you did, how you determined if it was functioning properly or not.
Yeah, and I would just encourage everybody to be able to have something to fall back on, because we've had a lot of comments about people just going in and seeing if it feels okay. And that's very hard if there's any kind of enforcement action, it's very hard to defend. It felt okay to me that day.
Yeah, I had another question pop up. So if multiple inspectors are at an inspection, not sponsored inspectors, what line would you add the additional inspectors to?
Like Steve was saying earlier, a lot of the softwares allow for, you know, TREC would like them to all be listed here. A lot of the softwares will wrap around, I think as long as you get them on the report, additional information, you list out the inspectors with their license number. If your software can't do this up here, I think the next best place would be down here. Just notating that, you know, XYZ inspector number, you know, blah, blah, blah was on site. maybe your secondary inspector or something. So, we clarified, we added the word down here in the limitation sections of manufacturer. Trying to figure out where this is. Fahrenheit. Okay, right here. So you do not have, these are all, you do not have to verify the tonnage and manufacture. We have the word manufacturers match because we have been inspectors that have felt like warranty companies and stuff like that. Consumers come back to them and say, well, this warranty company wouldn't do it because the tonnage wasn't right. They didn't match up right, or the manufacturers weren't matched properly. That's outside the scope of our inspection. And we added the words visible material used for water. So we added the word visible to make sure that the inspector was covered, that he can't see in the wall. So if the material changes in there, if they have copper going in the wall and they change over to PVC, and it starts leaking, that's not a deficiency that we could, or something we could have reported. And then we got the 80 PSI. These are all just changes that we did. You know, some just small clarifications. We put visible a lot in there. So this is, let's see where this is. XII. Trying to see where, right above B. So we, visible deficiencies. The absence of or visible deficiencies in the press. So we added the word visible, temperature pressure relief valve again.
I think that's good. I think that's a good wording on that. I like that.
Yeah. Again, we added about the gas leaks. Gas leaks in the water heater not associated with gas distribution. And of course, the entire gas distribution section was added. Inspector shall report location of gas meter. Visible material. So again, we're saying visible, used for gas distribution. Report noticeable leaks, selects gas shutoff valves within 6 feet of appliance, absence of gas appliance connector, or one that exceeds 6 feet in length. So again, we're talking about from the shutoff, and then some more, extends through this. A lot of these were taken out of the old standards that had gas distribution in there. We took those out. We went and dug up, Tony went and dug up some, and we put these in and then modified them. So we had deficiencies in the shutoffs, gas valves, appliance connector, conditioner system, lack of visible bonding on gas distribution system. So we're not saying it's just limited to CSST. We're saying lack of visible on bonding on gas distribution system, including CSST. And then lack of, somebody asked about sediment legs earlier, lack of sediment legs. So this goes in the gas distribution system. And here's our limitations. We can't inspect for a sacrificial anoid bonding or for its existent pressure test. We're not pressure testing the system. We're not licensed plumber. We're not lighting anything with an open flame and operating the shutoff valves. And then again, in the appliance section, we just basically added visible a whole bunch, the presence of visible active leaks, the absence of visible backflow prevention, the presence of visible active leaks. Again, on the gas section right here, on the range, gas leaks in the gas range, cooktops and ovens not associated with gas distribution system. We added down here in the fan section, number one, the lack of mechanical ventilation in a bathroom if no operable window is present. So that just reflects how the code reads. So if they have a window that opens, it's not required. And then at the bottom, we just moved this section, general provisions, to reflect how all the other sections read. So the old standards of practice had started off with the inspectors not required to, which is not how any other section read. So we just moved that down so that it would be consistent with the rest of the sections. And it just lists out what these aren't changed, they just moved.
All right, Sean, we've got just a couple more minutes before 11 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you over that because I know you're a busy man, but I want to say how much we appreciate you being on here. If you read in the chats, you see we've got very positive comments, and we've had great attendance to this Zoom meeting. So I just want to tell you thank you and thanks for your time on it. And there's a lot of chats here that we're not getting all of them, guys. I'm sorry if we didn't get to answer your question, but if you have questions, I'm sure you can email me or Sean or Steve, and we'll surely get you an answer back as soon as we can. The biggest thing about it, don't forget the new standards of practice and the required report form 7-6 is mandated as of February 1st. So you're coming right up on it. So if you don't have it ready, you need to get busy and get this thing done if you're going to be doing inspections first part of February.
Yep. And I put my email in the chat. So if you have any questions or concerns, I mean, I got elected to the chair position. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I got put in that position, and one of my goals is to kind of try to keep a good pulse on the inspector industry, because I am an inspector. I have to live with this stuff that comes out of TREC just like y'all do. And so any input, any feedback y'all have, attend our meetings. Y'all have the power to help make changes things you don't like or don't need to be there. So my goal is to make sure that everyone knows that we're open to any kind of changes. And I appreciate Paul asking us to be on here.
No, we're honored that you did. We appreciate you doing it. And I hope that the inspection members across the state with TREC and InterNACHI will join in and help you guys with wherever we can on it. So please attend the meetings. A lot of these things will be live. We can stream them and watch them on your computer or your smartphone. So, there's not an excuse not to participate. We'd love to have everyone participate because, they're always looking for new people to serve on the IAC committee. And, so if you're interested in doing something like that, get with Sean and, express your feelings, and, maybe it'll happen for you.
Yep.
But again, Sean, I appreciate it. I'll go ahead and end the thing because I'm past the time on it. But this meeting will be recorded, so you guys can go to the InterNACHI website, and the webinar will be loaded, and you can download it again and watch it. So again, and Brenda's telling me that you can, even though this was not a TREC approved continued ed class, you can add these 2 hours to your InterNACHI education log. So they are acceptable for that means. So, all right. I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
God
Paul.
bless all of you.